Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 285. Man, I think it's a great chapter. I'm having a great time with the chapter. I really loved it. I think it was cool. We're going to talk all about it. We got some excellent points because this was a nice full chapter, and hopefully we'll get through the video within 30 minutes. Anyway, in this chapter, Bakugo sees danger and he rushes in and gets in the way of an attack. And he did it because he was pushing Izuku out of the way, reflecting some of the rhetoric that Izuku and All Might once spoke about. That rhetoric about, moving without even thinking about it, where he really steps into being a hero. I mean, like, when you look at the final page, it's like, obviously it makes sense why this is Bakugo rising, because this is where Bakugo embodies one of those attributes that All Might embodied. So this was pretty cool. And I also saw people freaking out that Bakugo might die and all kinds of stuff, and it's like, guy, let's look at it. Let's look at that final page. When you look at the final page, what's even going on in that final page? Bakugo's got skewered in two spots that we can actually see. There were 4 tendrils. One of them's coming out of his gut. One of them's coming out of his, this little area right here. When you look at that, this isn't the worst injury in Hero Academia. It took a whole spire of Earth to take out Night Eye. I don't think Bakugo's going to go down because he has a little bit of a cut in his gut. Now, mind you, the gut is probably the scariest one because he might go septic from that part. But I don't think Shonen Jump really ever covers those kind of injuries. And then the other injury, it's actually pretty funny because, like, this area is one, like, you could get pretty lucky if you get stabbed here. So even getting skewered there, I think he's going to be all right. Like, honestly, it's Bakugo rising. He's going to be fine. If All Might survived and if Best Genius survived the gut blows that they received, Bakugo could probably survive this one. If Gran Torino was in a position that he can still receive first aid enough that that Shoto can say he's done first aid, Bakugo's gonna survive. It's not even worth really looking at unless there's poison involved, which I don't think there is, because then Endeavor's also screwed. It should be fine. And I think people have had punctured lungs before and they've been fine too. Anyway, there's reason to believe Bakugo's going to be fine. People have gotten worse injuries in Hero Academia and have survived. But also in this chapter, Shigaraki was fully taken over. And all I can really say is I'm ultimately very happy that we did not have to wait till the end of the series to see if it was possible for All For One to take over Shigaraki's body. This is good. I'm happy. I'm happy this happened. This makes sense that it's possible of happening. As you know, before, I have my thoughts about Shigaraki being taken over. In this particular situation, when I'm looking at it, previously I was kind of hoping that maybe All For One could, like, take over the body and cause a retreat. I didn't properly quantify All For One's obsession with his brother. I should have realized that vestige has a little bit more of staying power when it comes to going after the brother. It might still move Shigaraki to retreat. Well, we don't know yet. We need to see, like, what degree of thought that vestige has. And then we need to know if it's a vestige as well, because if All For One is remotely controlling Shigaraki, that's going to be a whole other can of worms. Now, All For One coming out this early does slightly adjust things, because now with All For One coming out this early, if Shigaraki is aware that he came out this early and Shigaraki comes back into control, we could see Shigaraki going into a weird kind of development arc. But this development arc, one of the ends for a weird shift here would be Shigaraki killing All For One, right? Because, like, if Shigaraki's thinking, well, I don't want to be controlled by you, but you're going to control me anyway, so I'm going to kill you. If Shigaraki does that, that might be, like, the good justification for why Shigaraki would want to go and kill All For One. But I think in doing that, Shigaraki's probably going to play into All For One's plans here. Other thing we could get is, like, if Shigaraki starts being reflective of what's going on in his mind, he might take a bit of a vacation from being a villain just to understand what's going on in his head. So this is interesting. Like, it popping up earlier does give the opportunity for new potentials to come about, and they all spring about from the acknowledgement that All For One took control of the kid's body. There's still some specifics we have to work through, but it is really interesting. We're going to have to see how this All For One thing is going to behave next week, because then that'll give us a better sense of what kind of story arcs the author might be thinking about. Speaking of the story arcs, though, there's a pretty interesting storyline that's occurring in this chapter, and that's going to be the one that's going to be covered in the general notes. The pages we're going to be looking at for this first bit are page 4, page 8, page 9, and page 10. I think the storyline that you see within the chapter is one that speaks about the conflict between what One For All is, like One For All's nature, and what One For All is for Izuku. So we have nature versus what Izuku can make of it. So let's just dissect that a little bit, and we'll start with page 4. So what I want to point you to in page 4 is this rhetoric that is coming off from the previous chapter. This really wicked image of Izuku's face. That's what this power is for. Now, I want to point you, Izuku's been looking pretty rough in the last chapter and this one. This isn't Izuku anymore. This is an Izuku who's being fueled by rage. For me, I would say that this is the Izuku he's a prisoner to his rage, and he's a prisoner to One For All's legacy kind of thing. Now, I do want to bring up the thoughts that one commenter had. Miguel, oh man, Miguel, I'm sorry I got your last name wrong, man. I always call you Miguel Jimenez? I'm gonna assume it's Miguel Jimenez. I apologize in advance, Miguel. But Miguel was saying on a live stream that what if One For All was controlling Izuku? And he brought up his good reasons, like, like Izuku going into danger like this. One For All could be motivating it. Now the issue here is, like, Izuku's already one of those people that would just run into danger anyway. But the thought does have a lot of merit. Let's just say, is One For All influencing Izuku? If we were to say that statement, we could say yes. You can make a really good argument for why that statement is true. And now the only question is whether or not One For All is directly influencing Izuku, or if Izuku is being influenced by his knowledge of One For All. So, given in this chapter where you see that the vestiges actually have a little bit more control than we previously knew for sure, if you were to say that One For All is like greasing the wheels and making it more likely for Izuku to go after people, that could be very possible. Miguel was pushing for the idea that One For All is impacting, like the One For All vestige itself is impacting and controlling Izuku slightly. I don't think that's the case. I think when I see Izuku rushing into danger here and saying that this is what the power is for, I feel like that's Izuku getting carried away by anger. Now, mind you, the big issue is whether or not One For All biases people towards this kind of maneuver. Does One For All cause a situation where you get into a rush-like state where you're not paying attention properly? That's the big question. It'd be really wicked if the author went for that kind of mechanism. Like it's kind of like it's a mechanism on the level of advertisements. It's that kind of thing. It's like it's affecting your subconscious. If One For All is doing that, that'd be pretty insidious. Given the family, given All For One is the master of insidious. I wouldn't be surprised if a little bit of it got to the brother, but for now, I feel more comfortable saying that when you're looking at Izuku in this particular situation, that Izuku is being affected by his perception of One For All, as opposed to any kind of direct influence from the One For All vestige. So we have that page. Let me take you to page 8 and 9 real quick. Okay, so page 4, the thing you have to take away is that Izuku is talking about what One For All is for. Alright, so that's what we're setting up here. We're talking about the purposes of One For All. The follow-up comes in page 8. Now, page 8 was interesting in that you had Bakugo reframing the situation where he thinks about specifically All Might not wanting to talk about the things that he's thinking about, and then Bakugo makes a connection. He says he's the one who basically created One For All, right? Isn't it an offshoot of his power? Multiple quirks. It's the same as him. And so he uses this commonality with All For One to conclude that One For All might be a cursed power. Okay, that itself that's pretty messed up, because that's already attaching even more negative connotation towards One For All. The fact that he's taking this one suspicious line, he's putting together this other thing that relates it to a suspicious person, and he's calling it a cursed power, that that by itself is not that does not leave the thought at just it's the way the users use it. That opens up the possibility that Bakugo is thinking specifically something in that package is causing a strange interaction within the users, and it's not from the user's own thoughts that's creating this weird interaction. So this is putting more emphasis on the one for all effects, which when you consider like what we were just talking about, like if it comes out that this is like a slight subconscious bias, this is going to be pretty rough to have to go through. Now, I do want to kind of like dissect what Bakugo was remembering here. He's the one who basically created One for All, right? It's an offshoot of his power, multiple quirks. It's the same as him. So he connected to this memory to try and legitimize the origin of One for All as being suspicious because it's connected to a source of evil. But we have to remember that the main capabilities of One for All, that is the ability, well, I was going to say, the transference ability and the thing that lets it go through different people, the thing that allows it to acquire quirks is something that came specifically from the brother. The only thing that All for One provided was the stockpile quirk. But really, without the brother, you don't get the mechanisms that we have now. So it's just important to remember, like, only the stockpile part has any connection to all. Well, actually, both parts have a connection because, you know, they're genetically related, but it's not really an offshoot of the brother's power. I mean, it's an offshoot of whatever genetics were going on in the parents, kind of thing. But you get it. I just want to be careful with this line because it's not so much that there is a direct evil element within One for All kind of thing. Anyway, the next valuable page, of course, is page 9, I believe. The important thing is that Bakugo acknowledges it's a cursed power, but then he goes at the same time and then we have the flashes, where, you know, there's All Might saving someone, there's the kids watching it, and then there's Izuku's journey up till now, where Izuku had mentioned, and when you go into page 11 you see it, that Izuku was going to be the guy that tried his best, right? And that's where the culmination of the plot thread is. What's going on here is that Bakugo's acknowledging that One for All might be a cursed power, and in this case we can say that the curse is this fight against All for One. But then when he brings up at the same time and he points out what Izuku was trying to do, that whole thing about being the Deku who tries his best, Bakugo, I think, at that moment understands that One for All is the mechanism that allows Izuku to come to his own. It's the mechanism that allows Izuku to stand up near him. It's the mechanism that allows Izuku to pursue All Might's footsteps. So that's, I think, the ultimate message that is coming out in terms of the inference when it comes to that particular storyline. Bakugo is seeing that Izuku is currently, he has tunnel vision on what Izuku believes One for All is for, whereas Bakugo is saying, like, no, One for All is not for fighting All for One, or not just that. It's the power that allows you to step onto the same stage. It's the power that allows you to pursue All Might. It's the power that allowed you to stand on your own 2 feet and try and be your own person. That's what Bakugo's probably seeing the power as. And in another way, what this is doing is giving Izuku more purpose beyond being the guy that destroys All for One. He's the guy that's going to be the #1 hero, right? Bakugo is pretty much establishing that that's what the power is for. It's for Izuku's journey towards being the #1 hero. Now, mind you, like, Izuku is technically correct when he says the power is for taking out All for One, for bodying him, because if that plot line never existed, Izuku wouldn't have the quirk. The quirk wouldn't have come down the line if there was never a danger that required the quirk to be passed on. Now, mind you, we still don't know what exactly happened between the first and the second user, so who knows? Maybe it's a situation where the quirk would always have been passed on. We don't know. But it's still a very interesting storyline, and I like that it's Bakugo that's ultimately coming out with it. So that's the main storyline that I think was in the... Well, that's one of the many storylines. Let's go into the page-by-page walkthrough, which will cover the other plot elements that were inside of this particular chapter. So on page 1, this one is a framing page. The first panel is there because the author wants to remind us the risks to Izuku's arms, and also frame your thinking so that whenever you see Izuku attacking, you're like, ooh, oh god, this is getting bad. And it's also worthwhile on this page just to get a sense of the scale of the damage of the shockwaves. Page 2 and 3 are combat pages. For me, aside from the damage and the damage to Izuku's arms, there's nothing really worth dissecting on these pages. Now, page 4 is critical for Shigaraki. First panel acknowledges that he's being pressured. This is important because we need to know Shigaraki is aware of his weakness. That does change things. Next, Shigaraki mentions how the efforts of the heroes brought him to this point. And this is important because it reminds you once more that the author is really pushing the idea that everyone's efforts were worthwhile when it comes to the Shigaraki side. When contrasted with the Higanto side, it's still very interesting given that there's the Higanto side isn't seeing the returns from their investments. So if I were the author, I think, with all this setup, I would try and do a reversal of the situation. In this case, have a situation where Shigaraki ultimately gets away, and then have Higanto fall at the critical moment and show that the efforts of Momo's side came through. That way, you would have the Izuku side wondering like what it was all for. Like they made so many gains, but Shigaraki ultimately gets away, while Momo's side understands that no matter how small, they ended up mattering. So you would have both sides experiencing different variations of what the other side was getting, right? So at the end of the day, they have an interesting little mix of experiences. I think it would be really cool to see that kind of, is it irony? I'm not too sure. It's that kind of contrast between the two sides. That's probably the better word for it. Anyway, the second and third panels are on page 4. Are important because Shigaraki acknowledges the obstacle that Izuku poses, which brings me to my thoughts like, what happens after here? Because we had a commenter on the live stream mentioning that Shigaraki was going to kill the doctor. And even if Shigaraki was going to kill the doctor when he got out of the tube, at the end of the day, Shigaraki's realizing that, well, he flat out said it. Izuku's standing in the way of his dreams. He's standing in the way of his dreams. If Shigaraki survives this, he's going to be like, well, shit, I need to go and get my power up. I need to be at a perfect level because this boy is too much. I don't want to get controlled by All For One again. I want to do this on my own. Like I need to suit myself up with some more science. If he says that, that gives us a mechanism to give the heroes more time to recover, and it also makes I think it's worthwhile. I don't think Shigaraki, after spending this whole page talking about how hard he got bodied, that he's going to think that he's going to be fine with 75%. Shigaraki's probably going to want more after the absolute terror that Izuku has inflicted upon him. That's what I would say after seeing this. Now, what this causes, like, if the doctor gets away, like, if Higanto doesn't save the doctor, and the doctor gets put in jail, that gives us enough motive for them to do a jailbreak, because they're going to be going after the doctor specifically so that the doctor can soup up Shigaraki one more time. I mean, it does open up avenues. Right now, it looks like Shigaraki has acknowledged that there is an obstacle in his path, and right now, if we get past this, it's going the plot point for Shigaraki is going to turn into, I need to figure out a way to get over the obstacle that is Izuku, because Izuku's only going to get worse for him, and we all know that. Izuku still has so many quirks that haven't come out. It's going to be a problem. We're not ending the series with Izuku with 4 quirks not unlocked. Page 5 begins Shigaraki's search for a way to beat Izuku. Honestly, this thought might have opened the door for All For One. It's hard to tell. We have to see next week. Page 6 is an amazing Bakugo page that follows up from the Class 1A versus 1B arc. Because look at what Bakugo did. He correctly analyzed the situation in the sky, he managed resources on the ground, and he came up with a plan. This is like 100% competent Bakugo, and also, competent Endeavor figuring out exactly what was going on. Endeavor doesn't need that much instructions. He hears Bakugo talking. He's not too big-headed. He hears what's going on. He's like, all right, I get you. And then also on this page, I just wanted to point out, because if you're not looking carefully, you might miss it, but Ryukyu is being held up by Manuel, so that pretty much tells us that Ryukyu is out of the game. She probably has a really messed up arm, but yeah, she's held in Manuel's arms, and I believe that Gran Torino is also in Manuel's arms, just from a few of the shots. But it's good to know where those two are. I am kind of curious as to the rest of the battle that's going on this battlefield, because as we remember, there's the Nomu fighting Native and Burning and all of them. I'm curious. Now, page 7 is a curious page because of Rocklock. It's very interesting that the author chose to invoke Rocklock's characterization one more time. Like, only for it to serve as a reminder to both, us the readers, and Rocklock himself. Like, why are you having a character remind him of what he chose to believe? Did you need people to remember Rocklock's defining trait, but it's unnecessary in the given moment. Did you want to show the moment of weakness and fear while simultaneously showing how far Bakugo and Shoto have come? But we already know that those two are amazing. It's pretty much them and Izuku. We know those are the main guys of Class 1A. And Rocklock isn't a major character for his opinions to really matter in the long run. You know, in a way though, he's gotten more characterization than Ryukyu in this arc, because Ryukyu's just shown off competence. She's just doing actions. You don't see introspection from Ryukyu's part. But Rocklock's having a moment of fear. He's having a moment of tremble. He's having a moment where he's talking about how worried he is about these kids. And that's ultimately the question, like, why take the time to show this character despairing and being worried for the kids? Now, my conspiracy-minded mind is pointing me to like this being an investment that comes back in the future. It's a strange allocation of panels, and it just makes more sense that this thing is being allocated if the author is setting up a critical Rocklock moment. Like, this would be similar to what happened with Midnight, where Midnight was talking about how they need the help of kids right now, and we know where Midnight ended up. She had a big moment against Giganto, and then she was taken down and ultimately was being approached by unsavory folk, right? So this feels a lot like what happened with Midnight in terms of development. So that might imply that Rocklock's going to get in the way of a significant villain. Alright, so we covered page 8 and 9, and we move on. Actually, no, there's one thing, page 9. It's just interesting. It's always interesting when you see the 4 boys together and you don't see the kid with the wings. It's always just very interesting whenever that happens. Okay, we go into page 10 and 11. Oh, we had covered page 10. Page 11 executes the plan against Shigaraki. We see Izuku there. We see Endeavor getting into position. That was pretty cool. Page 12 does something really interesting, and I think the author just does this whenever Endeavor is doing something cool. So first off, the construction of the page. I love how prominence burns like causes the entire page to kind of warp when it comes to the panel shapes. Like that's just so cool. Second, we see that Izuku stops. So I think this was definitely a problem. Like, imagine you're in the zone and suddenly you're jolted out of it. Like, Izuku leaving the mind space of like, I need to kill Shigaraki, probably dulled his reflexes just like, you know, by a split second kind of thing. But there's something good here in that Izuku wasn't being blinded. This is the thing that like really throws me off. Izuku has enough sense to stop when he sees Endeavor. That's not someone that's in a full-on rage mode. At least in the terms of like a narrative rage mode. Page 13 is a takeover page, so like I said before, not surprised by it, but I do want to be careful with the wording here. All for One said, lend me your body, and you lend carries that connotation that it could be relative, it could have consent. So it might imply that Shigaraki consented to things at the end, but there's still things that we can take away from this even if Shigaraki consented. One, it tells us that the vestiges have the capability to control their hosts in general. I think the All for One power package has the same vestige system as the One for All package since they're related. So I'm willing to say that I'm willing to say the One for All power package could do probably the same thing. Two, if Shigaraki consented, then he pretty much just showed how full of hot air he is, because this is the guy that was talking smack about the giant whose shoulders he was standing on. So coming back to that giant when things get too tough and he realizes he's not as big as he thought he was, Shigaraki's big talk about him being better is pretty much deflated. Now, if Shigaraki didn't consent in the sense that All for One saying lend me your body is the same as when like a brother says lend me your toy to his little brother and just intimidates him into not saying anything about it, right? If it's that kind of lending, then Shigaraki has just proven that he has no idea what he has no idea what's going on in his mind. And you know, like All for One speaking with polite words but doing insidious things it's his entire character. This guy is the master of speaking in niceties while controlling the whole criminal underground. This is the guy who will do linguistic gymnastics to not sound like a bad guy while murdering people. That's who All for One is. So honestly, from my perspective, when I see All for One saying, hey, Shigaraki, lend me your body, I'm pretty much just imagining he's like, yo, like knock him out, I'm taking your body kind of thing, you know, that kind of maneuver. That's what I'm imagining, because that's pretty consistent with what All for One is. He likes painting himself as this like big benevolent benefactor, but we all know the truth. In one hand he saves Shigaraki, in the other hand he goes and tells a kid to go murder 2 people in the back alleys. Anyway, I could ramble about this the whole time. The main takeaway point is that Shigaraki's a man-child, and he's running around in All for One's palm. Shigaraki sees what All for One wants him to see. I think that's a fair thing to say. Page 14 is critical. Happy to acknowledge that people are going in for the kill shots, given that Endeavor is like, just why won't you go down, man? So Endeavor gets hit by these strange tendrils. Now, we've seen these tendrils as a part of the forced quirk application. But are we really sure that's all that the tendrils can do, like force a quirk to activate? Like, for instance, can All for One extend the stealing function from All for One into the tendrils? Given that he can combine so many other quirks, I am legit worried. On the page though, it does look like All for One is still obsessed with his brother. So that might be what saves the other people, because if All for One can steal through the tendrils, Endeavor could have had his quirk stolen, and then like the flames that are still on him might just be like a delayed effect, and they might go out immediately, or like go out in 5 minutes. And so in that case, Bakugo could also have his quirk stolen. If we were just looking at past capabilities, like seeing in the All for One power users put together quirks, there's nothing stopping it. Page 15, I think, was a beautiful page. The most interesting thing is the order of the flashbacks at the bottom of the page. So let's see if we can like figure this out. If there's a meaning, maybe we can derive it. First image is Bakugo at his worst. Second is the time Izuku said his body just moved on its own. Third is the time that Bakugo expressed his guilt over All Might. Fourth is the time that Izuku and Bakugo had a healthy conversation for once. Fifth was Bakugo doing the Class 1A versus Class 1B fight given the coat collar, or it would have been somewhere in winter. I think it's Class 1A versus 1B, but I might be wrong on that one. I need to go back and look. Next was the time that Izuku was keeping up with him. And finally was the time when Bakugo was at his most vulnerable. So if you look at the sequence, there's an alternation between the two. It's the Bakugo storyline and then the story of Izuku and Bakugo. If I was to assume a logic here, I'd say the Bakugo storyline is saying that even though he's grown so much, he's ultimately still afraid somewhere, given the final flashback image. And then the Izuku story, I would say Bakugo sees it as the story of the kid who was trying to catch up to Bakugo as a rival. So the shot of the two of them together like this is the one that to me symbolizes the catching up, or like the keeping of pace. And then after that, we have the final page, which we already talked about. I think Bakugo's going to be alright. It's a pretty cool shot, though. Izuku looks pretty beat up, though. I mean, he's going to have to switch to kicks now, but like Bakugo said, he's using the kicks right now to... I think Bakugo said, yeah, well, Izuku's using the kicks probably to keep himself afloat. Wait, he doesn't need to keep himself afloat. He has float. Anyway, point is, what happens now? I don't know. Higanto's on the horizon. Shigaraki's state right now is questionable. We need to see what's going to happen with All for One. Like, I really don't think All for One is going to be able to run much longer. I mean, he's a charred body walking. At the very least, Endeavor's prominence burn, that's gonna definitely dent Regeneration's effectivity. If Shoto could come in there and manage to also burn him up a bit, maybe give Shoto some development with his power structure, maybe he can pull off one of Endeavor's techniques or something, that'd be cool. In terms of scenes that I would like to see, I'm still waiting for the day that Horikoshi shows a scene, a flashback to when Bakugo was talking to the kids that he was taking care of for his provisional license stuff, and where he was talking to the ringleader. I really think the ringleader from that arc, I think that kid was quirkless, and I'm pretty sure that kid might have conveyed something to Bakugo, and Bakugo might have had a great moment where he told the kid, hey, don't worry, I know a guy who's quirkless and he was pretty cool anyway, something like that, right? I would love if that's what we open the next week's chapter with, because Bakugo just got really damaged. I feel like that's the kind of thing that you could open up a chapter with. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, man, we're in a nasty situation here, because the worst thing we could get is Izuku having a freak out over Bakugo getting hurt. Right now, we have to really hope that Endeavor and Shoto can do something about what's going on with Shigaraki here. I can't really predict like the short-term future. I can only really see things beyond this point. But with Rocklock having his strange setup, Endeavor still being in the sky, Shoto still being in the sky, Shoto probably saw what was about to happen to Izuku as well. So Shoto could realistically make the next move here. But we're going to have to see. Bakugo's going to need to be saved, because Bakugo might be in shock there. So he's going to have to stay afloat somehow. But again, looking at his body, he only took 2 direct hits. So that's better than the 4 that were coming towards him. Yeah, there's too many unknown factors here, right? Like, we really just need any one person to show up. Like, if Ryukyu shows up, that could probably help out a little bit. If Aizawa, like, wakes up and just looks towards the sky just once. Because, like, we're talking about Aizawa. Aizawa had the storyline saying, like, hey, I'm not going to let you touch my kids. Right now, one of them got, like, intimately touched, right? So Aizawa could open his eyes for one last moment. Maybe the trembling that Rocklock had on his hands just woke him up, just shook him awake. Maybe he can look at the guy for one moment to let someone else get a nice shot in. And then we have Higanto coming in as well. So, like, there's multiple spots where we could see something unleash itself. The other thing, going back to Izuku, if there is something going on with One For All, Izuku seeing Bakugo get hurt might be the thing that causes, like, the final explosion of One For All. Like, if we're expecting something to come out of that package, seeing his best friend, or the person that he thinks is his best friend, look like he almost got killed, that might affect him. We could also get a possibility of Bakugo just saying, like, oh, it's just a flesh wound, and still fighting, because that would be pretty awesome if he has. Characters have been, well, not in Hero Academia, but anime characters have been shot in the gut before, and they've continued walking around after that part. Like, usually a shot in the gut is one that translates to, like, oh my god, this guy was still doing really competent things even with that thing in his gut. So it's that kind of stuff. Like, that is very anime and manga-y, so we could potentially see that. But I think if we were, like, to follow the most stereotypical shonen mindset, Izuku's gonna have a massive rage mode freak out. I mean, this is like when Super Saiyan first got unleashed. Seeing Bakugo get hurt might legitimately cause something in Izuku. The best thing about this is that we have not seen, the next chapter is hitting next week, so that's the best thing here. But anyway, yeah, man, that was My Hero Academia chapter 285. Oh, you know what? I'm looking back at the page with Shigaraki where he switches out with All For One, and I just want to, like, acknowledge that it started as a little point of darkness within Shigaraki's consciousness, and that's where All For One came from. It's just reminding you, All For One's always going to be there, man. Like, it's a vestige. It's always going to be there, no matter what Shigaraki tries to do. The guy has no control over his mental landscape. It's like, Shigaraki's probably the easiest person to take control of a lot of the characters in the series. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. Let me know what I might have missed. And till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. Again, also, pretty cool to see charred up bodied Shigaraki. I wonder if he still has eyes. Probably not.